Murdaugh. Well, welcome to Stillspeakpod. So, tonight's video is about guess who? Alex Murdaugh. And you're not going to believe this. Okay, so there's a ton. And when I'm saying ton, I want you to understand a ton of updates about this case. So much that we are not going to cover it all in this video. I'm going to do this video. Maybe tomorrow night I'll do a second one, or Sunday night. The biggest update that I can bring to you just occurred. If you have not heard about it already, you're just going to be flabbergasted. So my last video on Murdaugh was about how he had been charged with 27 charges through the grand jury. Well, he was supposed to have another bond hearing today, but last minute yesterday it was canceled and they were attempting to reschedule it. From what I've seen, it will be now on Monday. The reason being that it was canceled was because Alex Murdaugh now has more charges through the grand jury. This time, 21 more charges, bringing the total to 48 charges. In addition to the 5 felonies that he was arrested for in 2 different instances. One where he was charged with 3 felonies, one time that he was charged with 2, plus the 8 civil suits against him, plus all the SLED investigations that had been opened into all the different deaths and scams involved with the Murdaugh family. The original 27 charges came out to be $1.3 million, and a good deal of that money involved the Satterfield sons. Well, this one, brings the grand total up to $6,218,923.33. Holy shit. And excuse my French, hopefully you have earbuds in if you have kids around, but whoa. What? Just what? The original grand jury conclusion of 27 charges involved 5 indictments. This one involved 7, and the charges are relatively the same. It involves computer crimes, money laundering, and forgery. And oh my goodness. I knew it had to be more money than just $1 million. And yeah, I was expecting a couple of $1 million, even into the $10 million. But still, when you see on your computer screen, 6 million and X amount of money in front of you, it's just like, what the hell? And I think what makes it even more just mind-blowing to me is we have no idea where this money is. I think if we knew where this money was, or what he spent it on, or something to that effect, I wouldn't be so shocked by the amount. I think I would just be like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense because he spent it on this and he spent it on that. We have no idea where this money is and what he spent it on or gave it to. Oh my goodness, Alex. In some of them, it talked about the victims of Alex Murdaugh. And in one of them, it says that Alex, reportedly told one of his clients, Johnny Bush, that he was going to allocate $100,000 of his settlement money to do an accident reconstruction for his case. However, he didn't do that. He transferred $95,000 to the fraudulent account forged for his personal gain. And prosecutors are alleging that he used this money for his own credit card bills, cash, and checks to associates. So they're trying to give a sort of explanation for where this money went, but it's really vague. So he just was giving out cash and checks to friends and family for no reason? I mean, like, why was he doing that? And what was he giving the money for? And as far as credit card bills, okay, $6 million in credit card bills? I think not. 2 months after doing that to Johnny Bush in 2016, he rerouted $90,000 that was supposed to be compensated to another victim for his injuries. And I don't want to butcher this poor guy's name, but Jamayan Risher, or it might be a she, so excuse me if you are a she. Another indictment talked about another client, Randy Droughty, that he signed a settlement disbursement which would reflect the withholding of $8,819 for medical bills and $750 for a private investigator in November of 2017. But instead, he used Droughty's settlement fees to pay other clients he had stolen from. And then he allegedly put $9,500 into that fake bank account forge. 9 months later, in August of 2018, prosecutors found records that Murdaugh stole $85,000 from someone named Jordan Jinks, portrayed as a longtime friend of the family who had gone to Murdaugh for help. And Murdaugh told Jinks that he needed to hold the settlement proceeds to satisfy a medical insurance lien. The indictment said that 2 months later, Murdaugh then sent a $65,000 check to, again, his personal fake bank account forge. Further, he stole $112,500 in April of 2019 from the personal representative for the estate of Blondell Gary for his own gain. 9 months later after that, between February and July of 2020, he scammed another client who came to him for help. And Murdaugh moved a $750,000 check meant for the client and his injuries to, once again, forge. A few months later, now we're into late 2020. So this is just 6 months prior to the murders of Paul and Maggie. Murdaugh assured a client representing the estate of Sandra Taylor that the total wrongful death recovery would only be $30,000 and that he wasn't even going to charge a fee because the recovery was so low. However, Murdaugh was able to get $180,000 in the wrongful death settlement before writing more than $150,000 of that to forge once again. This is just absolutely mind-blowing. Here's the thing. This is why it's so mind-blowing. When I first heard this story, back when Paul and Maggie had been murdered, I never in a million years would have imagined that 6 months later, this has all happened. Like, it didn't even cross my mind that he was some shady lawyer who was doing this big, epic scheme and robbing from people. I never would have thought that. When I initially saw the story, there was so much focus on the fact that it was such a prominent family, that, they're all lawyers, and the son was involved in this boating accident, and there was also this other murder that they may be, attached to, and that would be Stephen Smith. And then, the housekeeper. And so there was just a lot of focus on just the fact that this name was involved with a lot of dead people. That's how it was being presented, right? And then we got through June, July, August, and then here comes September 4th when Alex does this, fake shooting on the side of the road. And from there, everything just snowballed. And this fall from grace has been the quickest, hardest fall I think I've seen in quite some time. It's just crazy. And what's interesting to me is that from what I've seen, they have enough evidence for him to be convicted of these charges, at least in my opinion. A grand jury actually agrees. And so the reality here is that Alex Murdaugh, who's currently been sitting in jail for a period of time now, who is trying to get out on bond, once he is convicted of these charges, Alex is probably going to go away for quite a while. And it's almost interesting to me because a lot of people are saying, oh, well, if it was Alex who killed Paul and Maggie, SLED would have made the arrest and blah, 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 blah. And I constantly have to remind people that sometimes the investigation takes longer for various different reasons. There's one current case right now that's ongoing. That's the case of Barry Morphew in Colorado. And he was arrested without his wife's body being found. And they arrested him almost a year to the day of her disappearance. And nobody thought that he would be arrested. And then a year later, he was. So you have to be patient. You have to allow SLED to do their job. I have shared on this channel that I used to believe that Alex had nothing to do with the murders, especially when it was being portrayed as just this big prominent family who happens to be surrounded by a lot of dead people. Once his shooting happened on the side of the road, I lost that. And I definitely do think, in my personal opinion, that Alex Murdaugh is directly or indirectly connected to the deaths of his son and wife. And if that is true, and he did have some role in it, whether he was the person who did it or he had someone do it, I can kind of understand, based on all these charges and all the lawsuits and the felony charges as well, why SLED may not have made their move yet to arrest him for the crime if he is guilty of it. Because honestly, there's no rush. He's already in jail, okay? He hasn't gotten out on bond, and he's probably going to be there for quite some time. So there's not a rush to get him into custody because he might be a flight risk or he may harm himself or anything like that. So really, they can take their time, do a good, thorough investigation, dot their I's, cross their T's, make sure everything connects to him. And then when it's appropriate and he's not, constantly getting slammed by grand jury charges, then you go ahead and charge him with murder. And of course, that's if he's involved with their deaths. A lot of murderers only have one motive, but then there's a whole other amount that have multiple motives. And like I said earlier, I think that it was not just one particular motive. And I have several different theories that include him being directly or indirectly involved. Personally, we all know the basic motives. And a long time ago, I saved a link from a defense lawyer who listed out different motives. The first on the list is conflicting opinion. And it says there are some topics that we don't always agree with, and it can create quarrels. The ultimate form of quarrel can be outrage. Number 2, power. And that can be, wanting to take over power. And that could be in different ways. Like, for example, if you're in a relationship where the person is mentally, emotionally, physically abusing you, okay? And you want to gain your power back, that would be a motive for you to want to hurt somebody. And I don't mean in a self-defense kind of way. I mean it like you decide that your only way out of the relationship is to kill that person so you can get your power back. Or it could be, something to the effect of you want to get a certain position and somebody is in your way and you want the power of that position, and so you have to eliminate the person who is in your way of gaining that power. And that's just 2 examples. It can also be not wanting to lose power. And what's power? What's power to you? I think everybody has a different definition of what that is. And I don't know, could it be prominent family who could do no wrong, who's well known in the community, who has all this power and influence? And if that person doesn't want to lose the power, its motive to kill is somebody stands in their way for them to lose their power. Number 3, any type of addiction, drugs, alcohol, etc. Number 4, self-defense. That's clear cut. Number 5, greediness. Number 6, money, which goes with greediness. Number 7, revenge. Number 8, sexual attraction. Number 9, super ego. And I found what is said under this super ego rather interesting. It says super ego is another reason for creating violence. It will make a man an extremist, and he will go for anything to dominate the surrounding people. It creates murder, social anxiety, and frustration as well. And then number 10 is extramarital affair. I don't think these were in any particular order. So if I look at this list, well, I can give Alex, well, not number 1, although there could have been some type of quarrel, but nah. Number 2, power. Oh yeah, absolutely. Number 3, if he really did have a drug addiction, which I'm still not sold on, but if he did, yeah, we can give him that. So number 3. Number 4, self-defense. No. Number 5, greediness. Well, yeah. 6, money. Revenge. Possibly. We can maybe put that on there. Now, why would I say maybe for revenge? Well, there could be a scenario here where one or both had told him they were going to out him, and he sought revenge on them. There could be a different element here where maybe due to Paul's boating accident, he felt like his son's actions were going to lead to his demise, and therefore wanted to seek revenge on his son. And maybe Maggie often defended Paul, and that caused a problem. Number 8, sexual attraction. Nah. Number 9, superego. Number 10, affair. No. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Number 1 was a maybe. So we'll say 6 out of 10 of these he fits. Some people only have one motive. 6 on the list he can fit. Dude is a hot mess. My God. Last we spoke, we talked about there being 17 cashier's checks that were written to Curtis Edward Smith, totaling $164,000. To be exact, it was $164,748.76, and that was between the fall of 2020 up until just 10 days prior to the deaths of Maggie and Paul. And if you thought 27 charges in the grand jury was shocking, if you thought the 21 additional charges we just talked about was shocking, well, I have something that's even more shocking than that. In addition to the 17 cashier checks that were written to Curtis Edward Smith, totaling $164,748.76, can't forget the cents, well, he also separately issued personal checks to Curtis Edward Smith. 254 personal checks to him, totaling, are you ready? $1,825,560, and don't forget the cents, 95 cents. Yep. So between 254 personal checks and 17 cashier checks, Alex Murdaugh gave Curtis Edward Smith over $1.8 million. So now you tell me why Curtis Edward Smith received $1.8 million from Alex Murdaugh. Just go ahead, put it in the comments. You tell me. Drugs? No way. Absolutely no way. I know people who are piss poor who have opiate addictions. There's no way that he spent $1.8 million on opiates. And actually, what I've actually learned over the last few years is that oftentimes people who end up with opiate addictions learn to manipulate the system, and they get it through prescriptions that they go and actually get themselves before they turn to a drug dealer to actually get those. They typically start out by getting prescriptions. Now, that's not everybody, so don't come at me and say, no, that's not true. But I've actually learned that a lot of them start off with prescription. Now, Curtis was like some construction type of guy, like an odds and ends type of dude. There's no way in hell he did enough work for Alex Murdaugh that totaled $1.8 million. I mean, come on. And this goes back to when Curtis Edward Smith went on TV with his lawyer, and his lawyer makes this statement that Curtis Edward Smith never received money from Alex Murdaugh. Well, yeah, he did. You should have probably been more specific. Did you mean in the last 2 months? Well, then that would have been accurate. But he definitely took money from Alex Murdaugh. The question is why and for what? Did Alex owe the money to Curtis for something? Was Curtis actually a part of Alex's scheme? Maybe he gave him the idea and they were laundering money through Curtis? I mean, $1.8 million isn't chump change here, folks. That's a lot of freaking money. If an average person makes, 50 grand a year. Let's just say 60 grand a year. Let's just say after taxes. Okay? They have to work 10 years to get freaking $600,000. This is $1.8 million. Hell, if handyman and construction people make $1.8 million, then I'm in the wrong business, if you know what I'm saying. The dynamic and relationship between Curtis Edward Smith and Alex Murdaugh really fascinates me. The next thing I'm going to say, I actually don't personally believe, but I don't think it's far reaching or anything of that nature, and it is something that I briefly thought about. There was a lot of talk that possibly Buster Murdaugh was having a relationship with Stephen Smith, and then of course because he's from this big prominent family, he didn't want that getting out, and so he had some involvement in the death of Stephen Smith. I don't personally actually believe that. I do believe that Stephen Smith was murdered, but I don't believe that it was connected to the Murdaughs. If I'm proven wrong, so be it, but that's where I currently stand. So now, taking that chatter amongst people, okay, in the town and online, I thought about this dynamic and relationship between Curtis Edward Smith and Alex Murdaugh. And to be transparent, had the brief thought that they were possibly having some sort of relationship and that Alex may have been paying him to keep quiet because he didn't want that to be exposed because of his status in this area. Now, is it possible? Yeah. With this story, anything's freaking possible. Do I personally believe that? At this point, no. However, I think it's something to consider. And I think that the dynamic between these two is really fascinating. And Alex throws Curtis under the bus, and then Curtis turns around and throws Alex under the bus, and then he's making this slight passive-aggressive threat through the New York Post, where he basically tells Alex that if you're thinking about setting me up, you better think twice. And he said it 2 different ways, and it was definitely a message of threat to Alex Murdaugh. And at the time, Alex was not in jail when he did this interview. And it always made me wonder why he worded it that way. Almost like, if you dare to do this, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. Well, what's the X, Y, Z? What do you have on Alex Murdaugh? What do you have on him that hasn't already been exposed? Because now we know Alex for who he really is, or was, and has been for quite some time. We're going back now to 2015. And the timing of these allegations with the timeline of Stephen Smith's death, it can't be ignored. It could be a coincidence, but it can't be ignored. And I say that because the forged bank account was made the same year that Stephen Smith died. And is that a coincidence, or is it connected in some way? And these allegations that I read to you today was 2016, a couple of times in 2017, a couple of times in 2018, 2020. So, it's a little odd, the timing. But it sounds like they're just getting started on Alex. And I don't think this is going to be the last of his grand jury charges. We'll probably see the charges go up again next month. I'll be shocked if they don't. And we'll see how that unfolds. But if there are more charges and victims and indictments, well, then I have to wonder, is it going to go back further than even 2015. And 2015 seems like yesterday, but we're coming up on 2022 already, which is just like, what? 2022? It's like we went from 2020 to 2022 in 2 days. It's wild. But 2015 doesn't sound that long ago, but it was 6 years. And up until Alex's shooting, it seems that people were not aware of what he was doing. And so he was carrying this on for 6 freaking years. 6 years. And so are we looking at this has been going on for 10 years and he just got the idea of doing the bank account in 2015? No. Maybe we'll find out. I don't know. I might be alone in this, but I find it really hard to believe that no one knew what was happening. I just do. I just don't believe that that's the case. Somebody had to know something. And you're going to tell me that all these lawyers that he was surrounded by didn't pick up on any of his behaviors or red flags? If not, then they're not the greatest of lawyers. I'm just saying. His family, his friends, his clients, no one? Or did Maggie and Paul know? Or had they just recently found out prior to their deaths? Let's go back. June 7th, 3 days prior to that, there was a motion to get their financial records. After many attempts to get them to hand it over on their own. 3 days later, Paul and Maggie were killed. Those financial records were going to expose the hell out of Alex Murdaugh a hell of a lot faster than it recently has happened. Because up until that point, he was apparently smooth sailing. He had been carrying this on for freaking years. And he had no way of knowing that 3 months after the murders, that everything would come tumbling down. So at the time of the murders, if he was trying to hide his activity over the last 6 years and buy himself more time or silence the people who knew what he had done, he probably would have thought at that time that he was buying a significant amount of time longer than it ended up being. And again, I'm going off of the idea that he's behind the murders because, like I've said in other videos, and I'm going to say it again, it's really hard for me to believe that all of this was going on, okay? And it just so happens to be that, well, Alex is a really shitty person, but he has nothing to do with these murders. If anything, to me, he's got the most motive out of anybody. The idea presented in the beginning in the media of like, maybe this is a revenge thing, just isn't meshing for me. It just isn't, it's just not connecting for me. Because, yeah, he did do this to a lot of people, and so he has a lot of victims, but it seems to me that a lot of these victims had no idea it even happened to them until after it came out what he had been doing. So this idea that one of his victims that he stole from, wanted to seek revenge on him or send him a message, so killed his wife and son, it's not meshing. It's just not. Or the idea that somebody from the boating accident or Mallory's family wanted to seek revenge, and they seeked revenge on not just Paul but also Maggie because she happened to be there, is also just not meshing for me. Because at that point, Paul didn't even go to trial. And I know that a lot of people were thinking like, oh, he's going to get away with this, But they didn't even get to the point of finding out if he was going to get away with it. I think the idea of revenge from a boating accident occupant would have made more sense if Paul had already went to trial and got away with it. If that happened and then he ended up being killed, well, then I would have been like, oh, okay, well, that makes total sense, because they didn't get their justice, and so they took the law into their own hands and got their own justice. So who the hell else would want to kill this son and mother? Who? Who knew they were at that property? They had multiple properties. This was their hunting lodge, their hunting estate, 1,700 acres. Who knew they were there? Who? Who knew they were at the kennels? Who? I'd love to know. Who else wanted them dead? So at this time, everything just keeps pointing back to Alex for me. And the more we hear about what he has done to people, the more I'm like, this guy is beyond capable of committing murder. Taking people's medical bills, taking from Gloria's sons, one of which is a vulnerable adult who needs that money, saw them lose their home and he did nothing about it. Taking from longtime friends and colleagues, taking money from his brother. Like, all morals are out the freaking window for Alex Murdaugh. But at the end of the day, I mean, there is still that possibility that no, he was just an awful person who did terrible things to many people and has many victims, but Maggie and Paul just aren't one of his victims. I personally find it hard to believe, but it's possible. That being said, in my next video, which will probably be Sunday night, I'm just going to say that, I'm going to push for tomorrow, but tomorrow I'm actually taking my kids to do some Christmas, type of events, and I don't know what time we'll get back and if I'll be prepared or not to come to you. So most likely Sunday night, we're going to talk about more updates and what else is going on in this case, because there's a lot more going on. Another occupant on the boat the night of the accident has also filed another lawsuit connected to this entire story. And this is the second person. And what's interesting to me is when I started covering the Murdaughs, I was doing person by person. So I started off talking about Stephen Smith's death, sorry about the ding, and then the next video was about the boating accident. And it got a lot of attention, a lot of comments, a lot of views. And I had like 2, maybe 3 people who got really pissed off at me because when I broke down the accident and what happened, I said something to the effect of, to be honest, they were all at fault that night. And they were of legal age, meaning they were adults at the time that this happened, and they all were drinking underage. They all knew that they were drinking underage. They all knew that the boat had no working lights. They knew that they were using a flashlight to guide their way. They stopped at bars along their route, and at no point did they stop and get an Uber and not get back on the boat. They all made terrible mistakes that night. People have a really hard time when somebody blames a victim. I wasn't blaming Mallory for her death. What I was saying was that there was not the best of choices that night, okay? There just wasn't. They were all at fault. They were all doing things they knew were wrong. And tragically, sadly, one of them ended up losing their life. And it's horrible. And she's a beautiful girl, so freaking young, so unnecessary, senseless, avoidable, etc. And I think that it does no service to pretend like they were these innocent victims on this boat, because it can be a cautionary tale for other people. And you can't bring her back, but the story can help somebody or stop somebody from making the same mistakes. And the 3 people who commented, were dead set on, Paul was this, selfish, prominent kid who could do no wrong, and he was this and he was that, and all the blame should be on him. And we should not discuss that they could have just left him that night and not gotten back on the boat with him. But anyway, if you want to see that video, it was like I think it was my 3rd video where I talk about the boating accident. Well, Connor Cook, he has a lawsuit. We've talked about that in other videos. We could rehash that in my next video. Well, his cousin now, Anthony Cook, also has filed a lawsuit, and one of the people that is listed in the lawsuit is the Parker's convenience store where Paul Murdaugh was caught on surveillance camera purchasing alcohol. I believe it was beer, if my memory is correct. I have a slight issue with this. And I might get a little hate for it, but that's okay. Because they all were using fake IDs and purchasing alcohol with those fake IDs. So when you went out that night and decided to use your fake ID, at that point, you were of sound mind and not drunk yet. And you still did it, and you knew it was wrong. And you also knew when Paul went into that store that he was going to be using a fake ID, and you knew he was going to be purchasing alcohol. And again, you willingly stayed on the boat with somebody who had been drinking and using a flashlight to guide your way. Now you want to turn around and sue the store who sold Paul the alcohol? Really? It just kind of put a bad taste in my mouth of people who are using this opportunity to possibly profit. And it doesn't sit well with me at all. And it's kind of ironic because there was so much talk about Paul being the one who was so entitled. But it seems to me that it certainly wasn't just Paul who was entitled. Listen, I know what they went through was tragic to experience, right? Having to see your friend go flying off a boat, not being able to find her body. It's traumatizing. I'm not going to take that away from them at all. Her, coming up a week later, knowing that her death was avoidable, it's terrible. I wouldn't want to be them because I'm sure they have nightmares and having to relive that. And then later, Paul gets killed, right? 2 years later, 2 years later, a little bit over 2 years. And even though at that point they hated him and weren't friends with him and blamed him, etc., he was their friend at one point. And so then losing him in that way. So these kids, who are no longer kids, obviously, they're all of drinking age now. They've been through a lot in their early adult years. At the same time, I'm of a generation where we take personal responsibility for our actions. I did a lot of dumb shit when I was their age. A lot. Things that I don't even know how I made it through certain things. A lot of bad mistakes. So trust me, I'm not better than them. Those were life experiences for me. Would I do any of them now? Hell no. I was young and dumb and naive to danger and just made really poor decisions. So this whole, trying to have this lawsuit, or he is having this lawsuit because it's filed against Parker's convenience store, just seems like a really low blow. Because, again, he knew what Paul went in there for. He himself was using a fake ID, and he still got on that boat. So to turn around and be like, well, you sold him alcohol, and then he got drunk, and then he killed my girlfriend. So it's your fault because Paul's dead. So now I need to hold somebody responsible for what happened. Well, what happened to personal responsibility? Mallory was his girlfriend. Why at no point did either of you say, he's totally out of control, he's been drinking too much, we need to leave and call a cab? He wasn't holding anybody hostage. You could have done that. And I'm not blaming him. I'm saying it was poor decision making. But I get it. We always want to blame somebody. We want somebody held accountable. Paul's gone, and so now this is the next best thing. We'll get more into that in the next video, and I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. Again, these kids at the time went through something horrific, and I'm sure they do all the shoulda, woulda, coulda, like we always do in certain circumstances, and they look back on it, and they probably too wish they would have just gotten off the boat. So I'm not going to sit here and, beat them over the head with it. And this is all in my opinion, and I'm not looking to attack them in any way. But on that note, this is interesting to me because after Paul and Maggie were killed, the occupants that are still living, which are only 4 of them, gave up their DNA voluntarily, as did Mallory Beach's family. And if they had any type of involvement in the death of Paul and Maggie, well, that would be a really stupid move to give it over willingly. But another stupid move, if they were involved in the death of Paul and Maggie, would be to bring attention to yourself further by filing a lawsuit and joining in the series of lawsuits that are out there involved with this family and all the different branches off of this family. It would probably be wise if you had some involvement to keep a low key. So this just further tells me that there's no involvement there personally. These surviving occupants of the boat are, yes, in their early 20s now. I hope that they've seeked out the proper therapies and have learned from this experience. But I do wonder what the motive is behind doing this lawsuit now. Why now? Why not in 2019? Why not in 2020? Why now in almost 2022? February will be 3 years since this happened. There's a hell of a lot of lawyers in South Carolina right now who are going to be making a killing. No pun intended, but the Satterfield sons have their lawyers who are badasses. You have Curtis Edward Smith, who has a lawyer, which, who's paying that lawyer, by the way? And who the hell is paying Alex Murdaugh's lawyers? That's a great question. Who the hell's paying them? And then are they being paid from money that was stolen from other people? Another great question. You have Connor Cook's lawyers, Mallory Beach's lawyers, Parker convenience stores lawyer, all of Alex's victims' lawyers. If they have them, some may not. They might just be relying on the prosecutor to handle that for the time being, and they may bring civil suits at a later date. So that's a lot of lawyers going around there. And yeah, Alex Murdaugh damaged the image of lawyers in this area, right? Because you're looking at this guy and you're thinking like, you were doing all this stuff. What are your colleagues doing? At the same time, what he's caused is this uptake in people needing lawyers. So it's kind of ironic in a way. So that's it. We're going to stop there for tonight with the Murdaughs. And I'm going to attempt to do a video tomorrow night with all the other updates. If not, it will be Sunday night. I actually enjoy discussing Murdaugh at times when we're covering so many stories of missing people and murders and whatnot. It kind of breaks up all that seriousness. Now, there's a lot of seriousness in this case as far as the death of Gloria, the death of Stephen, the death of Paul and Mallory and Maggie, but Alex Murdaugh himself, and discussing that aspect of the story, is just definitely much lighthearted than the constant sadness that is involved with these missing person cases. But I feel for, at the same time, every victim of Alex Murdaugh. Every person who was lied to and manipulated and stolen from. The people whose trust he broke. His clients who trusted him. My goodness. Some of them were friends of his. So add betrayal into the mix. It's just... We won't be stopping with this case anytime soon. I'm expecting a lot to develop over the next few months. We're going to see a lot more lawsuits and more charges, etc. So stick around and we'll continue talking Murdaugh. Until next time, I'll see you soon.